How's everybody doing this afternoon? My name is Ryan. I work for Visitor Services here at Columbia State Historic Park. Now, with the recent current events, everybody's pretty much stuck at home working on your physical distancing and staying healthy and helping us flatten the curve. And since all these issues have been happening, we haven't been able to give a tour of our town. So we thought maybe we would jump on Facebook and connect with you at home and give you a little ABCs of the town of Columbia. So hopefully you'll come along with me and we'll do a little tour for you today. My moderator is Rihanna. She's working the camera right now. If you have any questions about things that I'm saying, or if something interests you that you see and you want to type it on the screen, she'll relay it to me and we'll kind of make this a conversation. This is the first time that I've done this, so hopefully you'll fumble along with me, and like I said, let's make it a conversation. If you got any fourth graders at home, or if anybody's interested in California history, go ahead and jump on and get a hold of them right now, because we're going to be learning about a real, honest to goodness Gold Rush era town that is still here, and it's here because it's protected under the California State Park System. So first things first, a real quick overview of Columbia. Gold was discovered here back in 1850, a couple years after the famous gold discovery up near Sacramento at Sutter's Mill. Something happened after the gold that was discovered here was that thousands of people showed up and they decided to build a town. During this time, 4 years after the gold discovery, something that happens in California was that we had a major wildfire that basically destroyed the town, and the citizens, instead of leaving, actually built the town back up. This fire happened in the year of 1854. So gold was discovered in 1850. A fire burned down the town in 1854. They rebuilt the town, and then all of a sudden, 1857, another fire happens, and then they rebuilt the town again. Those were some of the major things that help us. What I like to say is that Columbia was seeded with gold. It grew because of water, and it was forged in fire. Now, the story is this. If you look right down the bottom of this, our stagecoach road, you can see how the town itself goes down. That was actually all dug out from the mining operations that happened. It was March 27th of the year 1850. There were 5 guys that came from the state of Maine, and one guy we believe might have been from the Missouri area, but we're still trying to figure it out. These 5 guys, they were called the Hildreth Party. They were led by a guy named Thaddeus Hildreth. Thaddeus came from Maine, left his girlfriend at the time, got his family or got his friends to come out to California to seek their riches just like everybody else did. After gold was discovered, the California Gold Rush brought thousands and thousands of people, not only from the United States, which was still on the East Coast, but people came from South America, they came from Chile, they came from Australia. You name it, they came, and they came quickly. The gold rush that happened in 1849 changed the face of California and the world for that matter. It was one of the greatest land migrations of people since the Crusades. It was a really, really big, pivotal part in our world history. Now, down here underneath the grove of trees, the Hildreth Party, they were coming from the Stanislaus River and they were hiking down a Native American trail. Rihanna, if you can just kind of point up this street. Our main street in Columbia, before it was Columbia, this main street was a Native American trail. The people that lived here in the California foothills peacefully for thousands and thousands of years were the Native Americans, and they were the Miwok people of the foothills of California. They have a very, very rich history. Unfortunately, the history is kind of a sad one when we talk about California Gold Rush, because the people that came here and invaded their land, they tore up the environment all for a piece of gold, something that you can't eat, something that you can't use for shelter. The value of gold that we put on it was a lot different than the Native Americans. Now, this trail that was put here by the Native American people, it was used by the miners when they came to the Stanislaus River. Stanislaus River is about 6-7 miles to the north of us. These 5 guys were down in the Stanislaus River panning for gold, striking out, not doing well at all. They decided to pick up their stuff, head down this trail, and maybe get down to the Tuolumne River or try to find some diggings elsewhere. They get into this basin, the Columbia Basin. They make their way down a trail and they go park it to camp out in the base of this hill, which is shaded by these trees over here, straight down there past that stop sign into this grassy little knoll. This is an area that we like to call the Discovery Zone. Now, these 5 guys are camped out for the night. Now, they're trying to think of a new plan because, like I said, they left their girlfriends, they left their families, they came all the way out here to get rich, and they weren't getting rich. They were not happy about this. So, in the middle of the night, very famously, it starts to rain on them, and all their stuff gets wet. Now, in 1850, we didn't have REI yet. Everything was canvas bags, wool blankets, all their stuff gets soaked. And to try to move heavy stuff in the rain, in the mud, in the muck, forget about it. So they were gonna stay here for another day or two while their stuff dries out. Now, very famously, one guy in the party, John Walker, was like, well, the Rains bought a little seasonal pool creek here in this area. I might as well use some of that water to try to pan for gold. And what happened in the next day or so was a pretty amazing feat. We have records that Mr. Walker put some, tried to wash some dirt out, or wash some dirt out, and wanted to raise some color, and immediately this guy pulls out 2 to 3 ounces of gold. And he's like, guys, there's gold in this basin. Nobody's mining here because there's no water here. There's no major river source anywhere right around here. So this was a dry diggings. Not many people were in the area. But they immediately find out that this place was really rich with gold. And we have reports that they pulled out 2 to 3 ounces per man per day for a couple of days. They were getting rich. They were trying to keep it quiet, but guess what? They're on a major trail in between the Tuolumne and the Stanislaus River. People keep passing the Hilders party going, why are the Hilders party over here hooping and hollering? They're getting rich. Ronnie, do you have a question?
I just need you to look at me.
Oh, I see you look at me. Sorry, we're doing a little direction over here. So like, why are you getting rich? Well, these guys are getting rich, and they're doing it really, really quickly. Soon more and more people show up. Our records indicate that within about 2 weeks, there was thousands of people in this mining camp. And with thousands of people in a mining camp, all of a sudden they needed supplies. And more people heard about the people coming here, and all of a sudden this place turned into one giant mining camp. People selling goods from like beans and food and things and shovels and picks, stuff that any miner would need was all brought to the area. This small little diggings turned into one big mining camp just about overnight. An article in one of the Stockton papers during the time was saying that it was almost like this place was touched by a magic wand, the amount of people and the amount of gold that was coming up out of this area. The only problem was there was no major water source here. The river was far away. And just like any place in California in the foothills, in the summertime, it stops raining and all of a sudden those little seasonal pools go away. When that went away, all of a sudden the miners went away. When the miners went away, the merchants went away, and all of a sudden this town was pretty much deserted. The Stockton paper that was mentioned about how big this place was actually said that it pretty much turned into a ghost town overnight. Those miners were wanting the water to come back. One of the main things that they needed in this town was a major source of water, and that was going to happen over the next year or two. So let's go ahead and walk up the street and I'll show you a little bit about this town. When we come up the street, I'm going to show you one of our flagship buildings that we have here. So when all this stuff is over and everybody can come out and visit our town, you're going to see pictures of this online. This is our Wells Fargo Express building. Now remember, in 1854, the town suffered a major fire. And that major fire burned down all the buildings. Every building around here prior to 1854 was built out of wood because it was readily available. Miners basically knocked down all the trees here and built all these buildings out of wood so people could rent them out and run businesses. What you're looking at here is our Wells Fargo Express. This is kind of the flagship building that we have here in Columbia. This is one you're going to see all over the place. But this was one of the most pivotal things that you could have in a gold rush town. Remember, we are miles and miles away from the nearest port city, which was Stockton. Prior to that, it was San Francisco. Everything that had to come up here came out of San Francisco. That's what opened up trade, was that port. And all of a sudden, everybody would end up there, but that's where everything was at. So to bring it up here was a monumental task for all the miners that lived in this area. Now, an express company is just that. They are like a Federal Express, FedEx, if you will. They would move, it was like your Amazon of the day, right? So they would move goods and things from one point to another. Now, one of the most important thing a miner wanted from when he was working here, when he's thousands of miles from home, is letters from home. So they were pretty much the post office. If you were working in your mine and you just got $200–300 worth of gold dust and you wanted to exchange it for gold coin, you came to an express office. Now, express offices started out in an interesting way. Wells Fargo was one of the bigger ones, and they had a plan when they came out to California. But prior to Wells Fargo, one of the first express offices that we had in the southern mines or in California was called Todd Express. It was ran by a guy named Alexander Todd. Now, I was recently doing research about Alexander Todd and the express companies, and I came across some pretty interesting information that we have. That was Alexander Todd came out to California not to run an express business, he wanted to be a miner. He came around the horn, lands in San Francisco, decides to, when you're in San Francisco, you can either go two ways. You can either go to the northern mines, which was you're going to take a steamer, or you're going to take a boat, or you're going to walk up to Sacramento and go off in the northern mines. Or you came to the southern mines, which was where we're at. And that's where you came from San Francisco. You landed in the town of Stockton, and then from there you worked your way up to the southern mines. There was definitely a northern and southern mines. That's why Columbia is known as the gem of the southern mines, because we were the biggest southern mining town in California. Now this Alexander Todd guy, he decides to go to the southern mines because the northern mines were too crowded, or I don't know really why he figured out which way he was going to go, but he decided to come up here. So he goes to the town of Sonora, which is now Sonora, and he comes through and he lands in the diggings areas here, and he starts to try to mining. Now, what I read about this is pretty funny. He's like, all right, great, I'm gonna get my pan, gonna get my rocker, and he's like, I don't like this at all. Mining is way too hard. I don't have the physical strength, I don't have the want to do it, it's cold, it's dirty, this is hard work. I'm gonna go home. And the people in the mining camp were like, where are you going? He's like, I'm going home, I'm headed back to San Francisco. And they're like, San Francisco, can you get my mail? And Alexander Todd was like, yeah, I'll get your mail, it'll cost you $1. And soon he had a list of 50 people, and he had $50 from each one of those persons to go down to San Francisco, find the post office or find their mail, and then bring it back. And if he brought it back to you here in the southern mines, then you would pay him 1 ounce of gold. Gold was $12 to $16 an ounce back then. Before you know it, Alexander Todd was in the express business. And there was all sorts of needs for stages and wagons to bring up goods and services to towns like this from the big port cities like Stockton and San Francisco. Express was big business. Now, if we can kind of walk, you think we can fit over here around a little bit? I don't know if we can get in here, but express businesses like Wells Fargo would move stuff all over. Now, is this going to work? Are we going to be in the thing? Can you see it? Just do it okay? So, this building is actually the real historic building built in 1858. You would come here to exchange your gold. You could send your gold all over the world if you wanted to, but most importantly, you would send your gold back to your family on the East Coast. If you had packages, they would be coming up on a daily stage up to Columbia here, and this is where you would get it. When you worked in the mines or you worked in your mining claims, you were just usually a little out of town in this basin, and then you would come into town on a Sunday, and on Sunday you'd show up, you would exchange your gold for gold coin, you'd probably go up the street and you would pay off your debts at the store, get new supplies for the next day, and around here you'd probably have a drink or two or three or four, and then you'd be done and you'd go off into your mining claim. But this building that you're in was one of the flagship buildings and one of the biggest operators here in the southern mines. It was one of the most important things that we had here in Columbia. Let's go ahead and turn back around and walk up the street. Oh, I broke the door. There we are. All right. Now, before we go, I want you to notice how tall those doors are. Why do you think they're so tall? Any idea? They're that tall because miners back in the day were huge, big, tall people. No, they're that tall because, remember, there's no electricity back in 1852, 1853. You needed to let in as much light as you could so you didn't have to light your oil lamps. Those oil lamps, that oil was expensive, and it came from pretty far away. And if that were to fail and fall down and light your stuff on fire, well, you probably lose everything. Insurance really wasn't a thing back in the early days. So you would have to figure out a way to get your capital back and get your money back if a fire would happen. Now, real tall doors also made of brick, right? The major fires of 1854 and 1857 burned all the wood down. The people were like, after the first fire in 1854, the people of the town very famously came out and were like, trying to put their fire out with bucket brigades and hook and ladder companies and just doing what they can to put this fire out. And the one building that was left standing in the business district was made of brick. And the people were like, brick? That's genius. We should build everything out of brick because brick's fireproof. And they're like, yeah, that's great. So they build everything out of brick, and they're like, you know what's even better? Iron doors. Let's put iron doors so the fire won't be able to go through. So you'll see these iron doors. And if you go around to any one of these Gold Rush era building towns or Gold Rush areas, you'll see the same kind of architecture because this is fireproof. And this would help from another fire that could come and burn your town down. But when you walk up to town, you'll be able to see that most of the area all has these brick buildings and iron doors. So let's come up this block a little bit. Now, the water went away, the miners went away, the town almost didn't happen. A group of people decided that they were going to bring water to this town. Now, this is a theme that actually happened throughout the Gold Rush era. There were lots of ditches getting built. There were some down Calaveras County, there were some in Mariposa County, all throughout Tuolumne County. People were trying to figure out how to bring water to the towns. Water was built with a ditch and flume system. A flume, if you're a little unfamiliar with a flume, if you come out to the foothills, and you still see them, they're still in use today, are basically wood canals. I used to have a picture of one. There's one right here. I don't know if we can get this on camera, but this is what a flume looks like. Now, it's basically just a water canal, but what the people of the town did was they formed a company. and they decided their company's name was going to be called the Columbia County Water Company. And the Columbia County Water Company had over 100 and something employees. It was going to be an employee-owned company, so that means that if you worked for the company, then you would get a stock in their company. And they got as many people as they can, and they got into all this crazy debt, but within about a year, they were actually successful in bringing about 100 miles, or about 60 miles worth of ditches and flumes from first 5 Mile Creek, which is just to the east of here, and then eventually to the Stanislaus River, and brought a water source into town. Now, when the water came to town, the people were like, great, there's plenty of water here. We can have water for our mining claims. There can be water for the town. Nobody will have to go anywhere. We got ourselves a real town here with all this water. The problem was, Columbia County Water Company wasn't going to give their water away for free. They were like, you want to use our water? It's going to cost you $6 a day. $6 a day to rig up a pipe from a flume to give you what's called a miner's inch, or enough water that you would need to operate your mining claim for an entire day, but it's going to cost you $6 a day. Now we know through our records that the miners that were here made about $8 to $10 a day. If you're making $8 a day in gold, but you got to pay $6 in water, you're not going to have very much money left over to go buy a drink afterwards, so you're probably going to be a little unhappy. There's lots of stories of people coming over to the Columbia County Water Company, which was located here at behind this bank, to try to talk to the people that were running the water company about their water prices. This caused protests, it caused fights. You wouldn't believe what it caused. California water wars have happened ever since before California even became a state. It's one of the things that we've always dealt with, but it's something that you just can't, I guess you just can't get rid of it. But when the water was brought to the town, the people didn't have to leave. It took a few years, but a competing water company did finally come along, and they relaxed prices a little bit. I want to show you this tree right here. This is one of my favorite trees in the park. It's called a catalpa tree. What I like to think about the catalpa tree is, one, it doesn't look like it should be here, right? Because it's not. A lot of the stuff, a lot of the trees that we have here in the park, and we have all different kinds of trees. We have fig trees, we got walnut trees, we got apple trees, we got, I mean, you name it, there's all different kinds of trees here. They were all brought from the people that came from their respective places along the world. This catalpa tree is actually something that you would see kind of in the Mississippi Valley. The leaves of the tree that are not on the tree right now, because we're just starting to bud out, are these really big, leafy, swampy looking things, because like I said, this kind of comes from like a swampy area like Louisiana and things like that. But the wood itself, they said, made really good firewood for your wood stoves, and it made really good picket fences. It was a really dense, hard wood. We have sayings that the children of the town would pull down these little, what you call them, the little bean pods. They look like cigars, so little kids were around pretending like they were smoking back then. I'll tell you, a lot of people used tobacco back in the day. What's it called? The Food and Drug Administration really wasn't around to kind of curb that stuff, but the kids would pretend like these would be cigars of the catalpa tree. We do know from our resources and our pictures that this tree itself was planted in 1869, right out here in front of the Jack Douglas Saloon. Saloons, big business in Columbia, California. This place was an entertainment capital, if you will. It had like the most saloons, the most fandangos, dance halls. They had theater. This place had every kind of entertainment that you could imagine. One of the entertainments that we had here that I always find was very, very interesting, but it was also very disturbing, was something called bull and bear fights. Have you heard of this bull and bear fight before, Rihanna?
I have.
You have? Oh, good. So it was like this. Back in the early mining days, now this is before families were here. This was when it was young men that came here that were just basically out on their own, young guys in their 20s, to come out and seek some sort of entertainment. They got heavy into drinking and they got into some blood sports kind of a thing. Well, anyway, the bull and bear fight in Columbia, we had an arena that was just outside of town. I actually have this. There's an ad for one. It's a very brutal thing. You basically trap a grizzly bear, and then you pin that grizzly bear up against the biggest bull in town. People would come in on Sundays, and on Sundays after they got all their business taken care of, would go to the bull and bear fights. There are numerous journal articles from people writing back home talking about how brutal this sport was, and they wish Columbia and the southern mines would not do them anymore. They didn't last too long here, but they did happen here. There's something that's just the people have been doing in the world for a very long time. What I always thought was interesting, the more I researched about it, because when I didn't really know anything about it until a few years ago when I started learning about this town, was that the bull and bear fights being a blood sport. But then I'm like, you know, you watch the stock market and thing these days, we have a bull market and a bear market, and even on, you know, Wall Street in New York City, there is a big statue of a bull and bear going head to head. That's kind of something that I'm always interested in wondering about. I have a sensational curiosity of just about everything. So let's keep walking up the town here. You're looking at a justice court. The main jail for Columbia was not here in Columbia. The first part of its existence, the main jail was basically out in Sonora. You were lucky if you got put in jail to be held over for a trial to find out whatever crime you did. This was pretty much mob justice in the beginning. The people, if you did something bad like to steal or to do something to hinder this town, the people of the town would rise up and basically give you the option to leave town. This justice court served as a justice court for many years. It's moved from different areas of the town, but this one, the small little thing, was just a place for a judge to listen to your court case, or if you had any legal records you wanted to put down, you could do it here in our township justice court. Let's keep on walking up. You're going to notice a candy kitchen. They were making candy since the beginning of time, right? And one of the big things here in Columbia, and we still have it today, unfortunately, due to the circumstances that we have, that Nelson's Candy Kitchen is closed, but you can call them anytime and they will send you some candy for while we're doing our physical distancing that we need to. But there was definitely candy shops in Columbia. There was photography areas where you can get your daguerreotypes done, or photography studios. There were barber shops. There were bathhouses. There were candle shops, there were livery stables, there were restaurants, there was, you name it, there was just about any kind of business. I recently discovered that we actually had a soda fountain shop here during Columbia's heyday, during the big boom. Let's keep walking up the street. We can maybe show you the, walking the street, with my back to the thing right now, I was looking at it. Let's show you over here, I don't know if we can get a good look at this, but one of the big, one of the large diverse populations that we had here, our Chinese culture that was brought over from China to help basically pave California, if you will. There was a very large Chinese population here working and living in Columbia, running shops and doing business. They were not treated very well at all. Just like any minority at the time, were not treated very well in the very beginning. Things did get better, but they had a lot of diversity. They had a lot of adversity to overcome, and they did it, and they did it very well. Unfortunately, they weren't allowed to start a mine by themselves. They could maybe buy one that was already used, but in the beginning, they weren't allowed to do it at all. So they would just adapt. They would find something else to do. They would run a business. We have stories of them running their laundry stores because the miners didn't want to mess with the laundry. So they would run a laundry a laundry business here in town, and then they would make their money washing the miners' clothes. And then at the end of the day, when they pick up to get paid for the laundry, then they would actually pull the gold dust out of their laundry tubs and make more money that way. They were really part of the fabric of California, and we do need to pay homage to them. Inside this little thing is basically what we would represent a Chinese drugstore. So you would come here to get any kind of thing that would help you get better if you weren't feeling too well. One of the things that I always like to talk about, especially in all the readings that you learn about in California, was that, the way you look separated people. Your religion and your politics separated people, but your food and your music is what actually brought everybody together. And we've read lots of numerous accounts of gentlemen being like, man, beans and bacon all day long, beans and bacon again. This Chinese fella over here, he had this kind of fish soup. Fish soup was great, and that actually kind of broke the mold for this town to become a very cosmopolitan town. And we know that by some of the writings that you can read here in Columbia. That one guy, I believe his name was Danny. He was one of the authors that wrote a very, very cool book called Ghost Town. It's about the folklore here in the town. But he mentioned that many miners would be, by the time they'd come out of their mines on Sunday to come in to exchange their gold, come into the Wells Fargo Express at the bottom of Main Street, meander up the street to pick up their supplies, head on over to pay off their debts at the general store, and then maybe get a drink. And by the time they hop back down by the Charlie and come back down this way, they already heard 10 different languages. They could hear things Italian, they could hear Native American. There was all different kinds of people here, all mingling together. A blacksmith shop, one of the most important things that you could have here. Obviously, there were a lot of horses around here, a lot of wagons. Livery stable. Livery is an interesting word, right? Where does livery come from? Livery is actually, I believe it means like porter, or somebody that would help you take your bags up. It's almost kind of like a helper. But a livery stable is basically your Uber of the gold rush. So you can go there, you can rent a horse. If you needed to get a ride, if you needed a wagon, you would go to your livery stable. This livery stable that we have here in our park is basically not a real livery stable. It would be a lot bigger. But this was actually built here for a filming of a pilot of a TV series back in the 90s. I'm gonna date myself right now, but this was actually called The Young Riders, and The Young Riders was a Western 90210 about the Pony Express. It's a really well done show, and I remember watching it. But when they filmed their pilot episode to submit to their studio, they built it here. And then the people of Columbia, since it fit in pretty well, they just left it here. There were numerous movies filmed in this place. There was movies with Clint Eastwood. We have records of all these movies in our museum, so hopefully when we get the museum back up and running, you can come in and check it out. One of the movies with I forgot what the movie was called. But a very famous scene was filmed in front of the McConnell House up here in High Noon. That was what the movie was called. As we keep on walking, we're going to show you this City Hotel. The City Hotel was built in the early times of life. Obviously, you're going to need a place to stay when you come to Columbia. We had hotels, you had boarding houses. This one's an interesting one. It has lots of interesting history. And the more you look online, the more you discover us, you'll find out that we do have what we like to call spirits around here. Now, stories about spirits. And I'm not going to get too much into this, but there are ghost tours that are available in Columbia. And then we have more information about those in town. But the stories about the spirits and the things that go bump in the night in this hotel, there's so many of them you kind of can't ignore them. But just another part of the amazing history that we have here. These are big elm trees. They've been planted here around the 1870s or so. Again, we know this because of pictures and documents that we have. Unfortunately, they weren't lasting very long. We had to remove one or two to replace with some new trees, so we have some new growth here. The gentleman that, when we did remove it, we actually found some pretty cool relics inside the tree that were all documented. But they're basically just like pieces of bottles and little nails and things like that. But you imagine we found quite a bit of stuff in a small tree well of what else would actually be underneath the ground if you really did excavate it, because, like I said, there were thousands and thousands of people here. Miranda, we're going to kind of come up. I don't know if we can get in and show you Papeete, but I think we should go up and show you what our first hand pumper looked. Then we're almost finished. Oh, another cool thing right over here. This leather saddle, this is a leather store, right? Well, this business was rented out by a guy named Sewell Knapp. Sewell Knapp is one of our, I like to say he's kind of our claim to fame, or he's like, when you come out to Gold Rush, California, it's like miners are never going to get rich, right? The best way to become rich in Gold Rush, California was to become a merchant. Well, Sewell Knapp might have not have heard that, because he came out in the 1850s, left Maine, left his girlfriend, makes it to San Francisco. I believe he went through the Isthmus of Panama, so he had a little money, and then he made it to the southern mines. He was in a place called Moccasin Creek, which is a few miles south of here, and within a 3-day period, this guy pulls up $118,000 worth of gold nuggets in 3 days. Now that's in 1850s money. That's tens of millions of dollars. That is a lot of money. And one of our docents here was actually really doing the research, and he was like, that's almost like 500 pounds of gold. How did he get 500 pounds of gold from Moccasin Creek down to Stockton? You know, the feat itself is wild. We know this because his kids wrote about him, and we have a lot of documentation about Sewell Knapp. But he got rich, and what he did was he went right back to Stockton, took a steamer, went back to San Francisco, cashed in his gold, went back to Maine, married his girlfriend, and then he's like, forget Maine. Maine's cold, it's freezing. This California place is where it's at. Come on, let's go start a new life there. And then he hops on another steamer with his new wife, and they come back here, and they come up to Columbia, and he builds himself a house. He starts himself a sawmill, and he buys this whole block up. He ran a store, which is now our museum, and he ran that store for the most of his life, and he had lots of kids and a big family that lived here. But Sewell Knapp was the success story of Columbia, and you'll hear a lot about him when you make it here on these other tours, but I like to talk about him because he did get seriously rich. And he rented out the rest of these stores in this building to whoever wanted to use them. This one right here is it's a leather store now, but for a time it was actually a meat department. I think you see that big window right there. If you imagine walking down Main Street and seeing big hams and hindquarters and things like that. There was a lot of, I guess you would say, commodities coming up here. One of the things that they knew how to do in California before we even became a state, when we were still part of Mexico, was the big ranchero period. Californios, you know, they knew the meat cattle industry, and it was a big industry here all throughout the valley. and that meat industry all made it up here. We're gonna come up here into our firehouse number 1, which is right on Main Street. Now the town burnt down twice, okay? The second time, the people were like, look, we're gonna need something to help us fight these fires. All these other little towns got these crazy fire engines, okay? There's a difference between a fire truck and a fire engine. Fire truck you drive, all right? You can drive that stuff. Now, Henry Ford, he's still baby at this time. But a fire engine they had, they're hand pumpers. You use them to help move water from, you know, here to there, and the town needed one. So our fire engine that we had, you will come along with me. We're gonna open this up and see if we can see it. Now, let's see if we can pick this guy up. There's not really too much lighting in here. But you're looking at Papeete. This was Columbia's first fire engine. Papeete was built in 1852, I believe in New York, or it was in Boston, Massachusetts, and actually worked a little bit in New York. But the people in New York thought it was a little too small for them because it was a pretty small little pumper. So it ends up going back to the manufacturer and get repainted and got a new name, Papeete. It was going to be sent off to the Sandwich Islands, or basically Hawaii, or some say Tahiti. One of the things about this story is that there's all different accounts on it. So we're still, you know, listening to the accounts and going with what we feel is best. But we do know that it was headed for the Sandwich Islands to go out there during the time, around 1860 or so. So it gets on a boat from the east coast of the United States, makes it all the way around the Horn, lands in San Francisco. Now in 1860s is kind of the end of the gold rush. Okay, the gold rush didn't last very, very long. It lasted, I mean, the boom was really within the first couple of years. After the 10 year, after about 1860 to 1870, families started coming. All the ruffian guys, the easy gold was basically gone. So all of a sudden this place became a lot more civilized. So there was a lot more women in town, and there was school kids, and you know, the place started becoming more of a town instead of a big gold rush boom town. And the people in the town found out that this engine was for sale in San Francisco. What happened was the crew and the ship that it was on lands in San Francisco, and the captain and crew jump ship. They take off. They leave the ship abandoned in San Francisco, and they come up to the gold fields to try to make it rich. They weren't going to hop on another boat and head all the way to the Sandwich Islands or Hawaii. They were going to stay here. So this pretty much sat there. The guys there, the fire crews of San Francisco, kind of liked it because it was pretty small. So they decided to pull it off a ship and then kind of take care of it until they figure out what to do with it. They put it up for sale, and after they put it up for sale, the people of Columbia hear about it. And they're like, there's a fire engine for sale for $2,000 in San Francisco. Let's buy it. How are we going to buy it? So all the men of the town were like, all right, guys, we're going to raise taxes because everybody loves taxes. We'll start a subscription. You're going to have to, you know, pay us just, you know, a couple bucks here and there, and we'll raise our money. And it was taking too long. The ladies of the town, the women of the town are like, you guys, forget about this. We're going to have an engine fair. We're going to have a big party, a big donation party. Figure a calico party or an engine fair where they're going to take donations, and they're going to sell dresses, and they're going to, you know, sell baked goods, and they're going to raise money. We know within about 5 days, $2,000 was raised in 1860, which is a pretty monumental fund. So the ladies of the town are like, here's the $2 grand. They headed to the head of the fire department. He gets on a stage. They go down to San Francisco. They buy it outright, and then they bring it right back up here. Now, when we got Papeete, this pumper, the town had fires, but it never burnt down ever again in total burning down them, if you will. The town finally was actually able to sustain throughout all the summers and the heat and the fires and things like that because of Papeete. And Papeete's here for you to come take a look at anytime that we're doing tours or when you're here. But it's a really cool piece of history. It's something that you can actually reach out and touch. Now, the interesting thing about it is we do bring it out for different events that we have. Right now, all the events are kind of, you know, a little lockdown, but this guy still works. The Columbia Volunteer Fire Department take really good care of it, and we do break it out, and I believe we saw it pump last 4th of July. It goes about 200 feet. It's pretty wild. It's a pretty neat thing to watch. It's a really, really cool piece of history. So we're going to come right back over the street over here, and we're going to walk over to the house, and we're just about finished. Watch out for the steps. It's a nice day today. Too bad everybody's stuck inside. Okay. So, here we are at the Wilson McConnell house. Now, This is kind of an important house. One, it's basically the last residence that's on Main Street. And two, it was owned by two very strong women of Columbia. Mrs. Wilson came here back in the 1870s with her family to live. They were going to have this house built and they were going to run a leather shop right next to the house. Mrs. Wilson had, I believe, 8 children. One of them was actually in a wheelchair, and she lived here with her husband. Right after the house was just about finished, her husband ends up passing away. And instead of Mrs. Wilson picking up her stuff and headed back home out of California and being closer to loved ones, she says, no, I'm going to stick it out here. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to see this house built. I'm going to run this business, and I'm going to do what we set out to do. And she did. She ends up running a business, raising her kids, and living in this home until she passes away later on in the 1880s. This house pretty much kind of just stayed here. Now, Columbia is here because of a couple of things. After the easy gold went away, the town pretty much stayed. But slowly over time, you get into the 1890s, you know, now all the mining's kind of pretty much done. You have to either work for a mining corporation, or a lot of the men go back to their trades. They go down in into the San Joaquin Valley to do agriculture, or they go up and they start working in the timber business. They start finding other things to do. The town pretty much just kind of goes to sleep then. What's interesting about Columbia is that we're tucked back. We're tucked back a little bit away from the main roads and the main towns. Like we have Sonora, which is our sister town, which is about 5-6 miles to the south of us. That got a lot more traffic. So Columbia just kind of sat back here. And the people of the town knew its importance, and they knew about it, and they knew that it was pretty important, and they didn't want to see it go away. But luckily for Columbia, that it was kind of tucked away and hidden and wasn't really on the eyes of everything to modernize or to change. Mrs. McConnell, who bought this house in the I believe it was 1940 when she came around here. So you get in 1910, 1911, or 1920, 1930s come by. There's a big move to do the California parks, to start going around and protecting the places that help us, keep us California. And around the 1930s, they really tried to get this under the state park badge to protect it from, turning into a Walgreens or having this place knocked down. But that kind of fell through. Obviously, there was a Depression era, things like that. It just really didn't work. Mrs. McConnell came here with her husband prior to World War II in the 1940s, and she really liked the house, and she really liked the area. And there was still that connection to the past at the time where you could still talk to somebody who lived during this time. And she really, embraced this town and wanted to do something about it. Mrs. McConnell was well-educated woman. She had a lot of connections in the state legislature, and actually she was the person that actually started the wheels running to basically get this place to turn into a state park. She, in 1945, finally petitioned the governor at the time. Her name was Governor Earl Warren, that, hey, let's make this place a state park. What do we have to do? And finally the governor was like, I'm just going to paraphrase real quick, but he was like, yeah, we've heard about it. Tell you what, if you can raise about $50,000, we'll match it, and then all of a sudden, bam, we're going to make this place a state park. And Mrs. McConnell says, challenge accepted, and immediately, through donations and subscriptions and all this stuff, she raises this $50,000, and the state's like, all right, great. And from that day on, this place became a California state park. I have a picture of her that I like to show, because she looks like everybody's favorite grandma. How you doing, sir?
Good, how are you?
Good, doing well, doing well. We'll go back up, we're doing a little. That's her right there. It's everybody's favorite grandma. Now, what she did was not only make this place there, she was pivotal in the making of this place being a state park, but after she did it, this place became the capital for a day. Everybody kind of showed up here. We're going to save it, we're going to redo it, we're going to keep it for the interpretation for people like you that want to learn more about California history. And after it was all said and done, she was like, this is awesome, we finally did it, everybody. And she's like, wait, is it cool if I still live here? Because it is my house. And and the governor was like, oh yeah, that's that's all right, it's 1945, piece of cake, you can live here for as long as you want. Mrs. Wilson lives to be 99 years old. She did not pass away until 2003. We have stories from old rangers that worked here a while ago and would tell me that they remember Mrs. Wilson sitting on that little chair right over there, waving at everybody coming by, just watching the people go to and fro throughout the town here. But she was one of the ones that got this place going. Well, that's about all we have for the tour today. I hope we will be able to do this again. I hope you got a little bit out of it. I'm sorry if I flubbed it up a little bit for those of you at home, but I really appreciate everybody that kind of watched this going on, and we're going to be doing more of these, so I look forward to seeing you. And if you have any more questions, you can post them online and we'll go ahead and answer them for you. And again, thanks again for this interesting time. I hope everybody stays healthy, and thanks for following along. Have a good day.